Hey, what's up everybody? Just bringing you a quick video to give you my take on the most recent balance patch. Alright, so first things first, I have to admit when I first saw this patch I wasn't very happy. But I did after rereading it I've revised my opinion. The first thing is this change to Liang, where the hit point of the drone has gone down and the cost has gone down. So when I first saw this, it was on the EA notes that had this listed as a nerf. I'm not really sure the guys know what a nerf means, because reducing the cost by 10 is a pretty big buff, and changing the hit points by like, what is this, 100 and 220? I mean, who cares, right? Like, it dies in 2 shots of most anti-air units. Now it still dies in 2 shots of most anti-air units. This is gonna mean that you can't pop a Liang drone onto a pad that has like a pitbull or a missile squad and fire the missile with it. It's going to go down almost instantly now when you do that. But you can still put it on pads that don't have an anti-air unit, which is the most infuriating thing that Liang does. Because why can Liang instantly spawn and steal pads? That's the real problem with Liang. Yeah, this was listed as a nerf. That immediately put me in a bad mood, because I saw this and was like, why on earth are you buffing Dr. Liang? Liang is the most broken. I mean, maybe not the most broken, now that we have good old Jade and Razor back in the game, but Liang is gross. I can't believe they reduced Liang cost. This change, I think, is kind of nonsense. I mean, the hit point change is good, I guess. Although it just makes Liang drone even more vulnerable. It now just, if it gets hit by one thing ever, it basically just goes down. So it's lost even more value in the scenarios where you should be using it, which is to heal up your units in a combat scenario, but has not. It's received a buff to its pad stealing ability, which is ridiculous. Why has that got a buff? That's anyway. Yeah, not a big fan of this. I don't know why the cost has been reduced to 40. That doesn't really make sense to me. Pretty sure they should just remove Liang drone's ability to steal pads, which I'm pretty sure is a thing they can do, having spoken to people who worked on the game. Pretty sure that's actually a thing they could. That's what they should do, in my opinion. Anyway, pretty sour about this change. I'm not sure why they reduced cost to 40. I think that's nonsense, but the hit point reduction is good. Obviously, Liang, any nerf to Liang is good, but it's kind of a buff more than anything. Alright, anyway, so moving on. That change makes no sense to me, but let's move on. Solomon reduced cost from 150 to 130. I think this is a great change. Solomon is easily the weakest GDI commander. All the other GDI commanders are pretty playable. Solomon's kind of bad. I think the 20 cost reduction is a big deal. This makes Solomon a lot easier to get off at critical times in the end of missiles. Just a good change. I think Solomon needed a little bit of a power spike. I'm a little bit concerned that, for those of you who don't know, Solomon is bugged at the moment. He does more base damage than he should. Ever since they changed the iron cannon to do 100% damage on the center tile and 50% damage on outer tiles, they changed it to a sliding scale depending on how far the unit is away from the center. So it sort of goes 100% in the middle, and then goes like 99%, 98%, 97%, like each pixel or whatever. I don't know the exact numbers, but more of a sliding scale instead of just a straight 100% or 50%, which is a great change to Solomon. But it bugged it out a little bit, and now it's doing more base damage than it's supposed to. So this cost reduction without the bug fix to the base damage is a little bit scary. We might see similar tactics with Solomon that we saw with Jade, where people just win the first missile and then just Solomon the base twice with some chip damage to finish off the base. And that's going to be a lot more viable now. It's 130 instead of 150. But overall, Solomon was the weakest GDI commander, so I think good change. Jump Jet Troopers health increased to 220. Yeah, I mean, Jump Jets sucked, I think. They were just a bad unit. Like, they were a really good unit for a really long time. Reworked to 40 Tiberium and making them 200 hit points made them made of paper. They just melted to anything, like a stiff breeze, knocked these guys out. They would just die to their hard, like, things they're supposed to hard counter, because they just didn't have enough hit points. Like, tanks would beat them, because tanks would just drive by and take out a member in 2 shots, and yeah, they just took damage all the time. So yeah, good change. I don't know if it's going to make them too strong. 40 cost is very cheap. They do have a lot of damage. And this is not insignificant health buff. This is like a plus, like, this is 10%. This is like having an extra level on your Jump Jet Troopers. So it remains to be seen if these guys are going to come back into the metagame, but I think they could do. It might be too strong now. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it's a good change, because jump jets were pretty firmly in the dumpster. So I like that they've got a little bit of a boost. They're going to probably be more viable now, which is nice. Shockwave troopers, increase speed from average to fast, 6.9. So this change makes no sense to me at all. And the same is true when we get to the flame change. It's exactly the same change. So I'm going to say what I say now, and we're not going to talk about flames because it's going to be the same thing. I don't understand this change at all, because speed is a very powerful stat in the game. This has been proven time and time again with unit nerfs have regularly been speed dumpstering them. Like scavengers only really got speed nerf, and they're now trash when they were overpowered. Drone swarm went from insane at fastest to pretty bad at fast to good again at faster, but they feel pretty balanced now. So speed is a very important stat. But the problem with shockwave troopers and flames is that they cost a lot, and they die to rifles and chuggies and now razorback and buggies and rhinos. And wheels and dogs. There's just loads of units in the metagame that are really popular that shred infantry. And shockwaves and flames are expensive and don't do that well even against the things they should do well against. Like, if shockwaves dominated rifles and militants, then I could see a reason to play them sometimes, because rifles and militants are so popular right now. It would be a good counter to the chem deck as well, because shocks are efficient against chems in their cost, like shocks and flames. But the problem is that they don't beat rifles well enough. 2 rifles will beat shocks and flames pretty easily if the rifles use defender's advantage effectively. This is a huge problem, because you spend so much money on the early game on your shocks and flames, and they just don't do well against rifles. And then your opponent can tech switch really quickly into their anti-infantry like armor unit, so like drone swarm, razorback, chuggy, whatever it is, and your shockwaves are just embarrassing. So I don't think this makes sense. I think a cost decrease might have made more sense than this, or even like rifle nerf. I think rifles and militants being too strong is the issue with shockwaves and flames right now, rather than them being too weak. It's just that rifles and militants are just so much better for a quarter the cost. It's just like, they're just not worth it. They're not worth the extra cost you put into shockwaves and flames. Okay, having said that, those guys are terrible. They were both, I consider them both to be D tier units. I didn't think they were remotely playable. So any buff to them is good. I just think this is a very weird buff to go with. And I don't think this is the issue with them. Like, I don't think speed was what was holding them back. I think it was just the fact that they don't do well enough against rifles. And they're just not as strong. Like, they just die too quickly, and rifles make them kind of embarrassing, because rifles are just so much more efficient. So yeah, I don't think this change helps. But I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see. I just don't think this is the right change for shockwaves and flames. I don't think it makes any sense to me. Cain, reduced cost from 130 to 110. So I'm going to start by saying this will make our most iconic commander viable in the game against infantry. That is a terrible explanation of why you have reduced Cain cost. Reducing the cost of Cain makes it more viable against everything, because it's just a straight buff. It's just a strict buff. I'm not saying it's going to make Cain good. I don't think it's going to... Like, 110, I still don't think that's the problem. The problem with Cain is not the cost. It is the hit points. Cain Tower, simply, you build it and it dies too quickly to almost everything. That is the issue with Cain. This change does not make it viable against infantry. That explanation makes no sense. It's still exactly the same against infantry. It's just a little bit cheaper. So that is nonsense. I don't understand their explanation. I don't think this is the problem. Cain needs more hit points. He doesn't need to cost less. He needs to be an expensive, powerful ability like Solomon. Like up here. It should be like 120 to 130, I think. It needs to live. The tower needs to be more impactful on the battlefield. The moment you make the tower, it shoots a couple of times and it dies. That's the problem with Cain Tower. You don't get enough damage out of it for the cost. And it doesn't provide enough zone control for long enough. Having said that, obviously a cost reduction is going to make it better. So I don't think it's going to bring Cain into the metagame. I think Cain will still be the worst commander in the game, especially since Solomon got a comparable buff, and he was the only one that Cain was ever, competing with in the dumpster tier. So I don't think this is going to make Cain good, but obviously any buff to Cain is a pretty good idea, because Cain sucks, so sure. But yeah, this description is just absolute nonsense. I don't know why, I don't know who wrote this description, but it doesn't make any sense. It reads like someone who doesn't play the game. Because that's not why Cain is bad against infantry. Anyway, rant over about that. The change is fine, because Cain needs help. But I don't think it really is the right change. Again, I think it's the same as the Shockwave Troopers. I think this needed hit points, not cost. But whatever. Fanatic damage to vehicles from 32 to 18. Great. Fantastic change. Why do Fanatics shred vehicles? No one knows. They've been overpowered since release. There's no reason for them to shred vehicles. They shouldn't. They just should. They're insane. They're insane units. They have really high DPS. Get an Oksana boost out of them. You actually get the boost is better than Oksana boost. You don't have the damage increase. So the boost on them is like kind of insane, and they cost the same as an Oksana boost. So you're getting like this unit that provides free Oksana boost. Yeah, they're just a gross unit. And the reason for them to shred vehicles was just too much. Great change. Love it. Don't know if it'll be enough to make Fanatics bad. I think that Razorback and Chem Warriors are what's making Fnatic bad at the moment, because Fnatic decks are just horrible against both of those things. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously a great change. There's no reason for Fanatics to kill vehicles, so A+, huge fan. Jade Catalyst Missile. Alright, this change is fantastic. Huge fan of this change. So, missile damage to structure from 3,500 to 2,500. Chemical explosion damage to structure from 2,250 to 2,500. So, what this means is, you can no longer viably kill the base by just winning the first missile and then throwing catalyst missiles at the base. You do actually need to get a chemical unit there now. So what happens now is if you get a Chem Warrior with 2 clouds, which is the normal standard Chem Warrior rush, you will now do 7,500 explosion damage and 2,500 missile damage, because you get 2 clouds and the warrior itself exploding and the missile. So that's 7,500 plus 2,500, 10,000 damage. This is 2/3 of a base, or two-thirds of half a base. So, you know, yeah, 2/3 of half the base. So when you fire the missile, you can destroy 2/3 of their remaining hit points with a Chem Warrior with 2 clouds. Previously, the damage would have been what, 6,750 plus 3,500. So about the same damage. But you no longer can just throw cat missiles at the base and expect to win the game. You do actually have to get a chemical warrior there, because now the Jade missile damage is 1,000 less. So you need an extra. For every 2 missiles you fired previously, you're basically going to need an extra missile. So this is a great change. It was super toxic that you could just get vision on the base and throw catalyst missiles at it. That was an absolutely miserable strategy. I still think that the chemical strategy of blowing up the base with Chem Warriors is an okay strategy to have in the game. I think it's a good thing to exist. I know it's frustrating as hell, it really is, but I think it is a good thing that exists in the game. It's an alternative win condition. It's nice to have things like that in the game. Maybe it needs more tuning, but this is a great change because now you actually need the Chemical Warrior. So this is one of the best changes, and that was very toxic strategy. So I'm a big fan of this. Chemical Warrior damage to vehicles 15 to 10. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Again, Chemical Warriors was getting quite powerful against vehicles. This will make sure optimum damage is dealt to vehicles. Whoever's writing these notes, I don't know if they even play the game. What does this even mean? What do you mean you were getting quite powerful against vehicles? They haven't changed. They haven't gotten more powerful than they previously were. And what do you mean this makes sure optimum damage is dealt to vehicles? You've determined that 10 is the optimum damage? Anyway, whatever. The guy writing these little bits, yeah, you need to work on it, mate. They're not great. But sure, Chemical Warriors beating wheels was ridiculous. Chemical Warriors are super beefy. Them beating up on like wheels and bikes and stuff was a nightmare. Like they were just too the same as Fanatics. They were just too efficient versus everything. So I'm a big fan of this change. I think Chemical Warriors might just have too many hit points. That might be the real issue with Chemical Warriors. So again, it might be the wrong change, but it is a change in the right direction. It is a nerf to Chemical Warriors who were probably too strong. So it is a good change for sure, in my opinion. Definitely moving the needle in the right direction. And then attack bikes. Obviously, Flame Troopers, we talked about it with shocks. Same thing, not going to go over it again. Okay, so here's the most controversial nerf of the patch. Attack bike. So it says added overrides to damage to air and added override to damage to vehicles. So again, this doesn't really make sense. What do you mean added override? You just mean they've changed the damage. Like you've decreased is the word you're looking for. Decreased damage to air, decreased damage to vehicles. Anyway. Great change in my opinion. I know this is going to be very controversial, but I think it's a fantastic change. This is entirely true. Attack bikes currently trade favorably with nearly every vehicle and air unit. This change ensures their power level is in line with other units. I completely agree. I think attack bikes traded really favorably with all ground vehicles and air pretty much. Like, Scorpion tanks just weren't worth making a lot of the time because they just got swarmed by bikes and killed. And bikes are a generalist unit that shoots up. And tanks are a specialist unit that only shoots vehicles and cost more than twice as much. So tanks should crush bikes super hard. They cost like 2.3 times as much. And they only shoot down. They only shoot vehicles, effectively. They should crush them. But the tax bikes were so good. They were just dominating tanks. They dominate Banshees. They were dominating pretty much everything. Now, having said that, obviously, Mohawks are now an issue. Mohawk is probably too strong. The previous buff that Mohawk got a while ago made no sense to me. Mohawk was already a good unit. I don't know why they buffed it again. But now Mohawk is disgusting and crushes bikes insanely hard. Like, it already crushed bikes, but now it just dominates them. So Mohawk is now a big issue and probably needs a rollback on that buff it got. And real issue with this patch, I think this is a good patch apart from the Liang drone change. And obviously, I think some of these changes were the wrong changes, but they are in the right direction. At least they're nerfs where we need nerfs. The real problem is there's a lot of stuff in that isn't here. Like, the stuff that is here is pretty decent, but there's a lot of stuff that should be here that isn't. There's no changes to Tech Lab, even though it's completely dominant in like 99% of the game. It's only the top of Tiberium where Tech Lab isn't completely dominant. There's no changes to Razorback, which is completely insane, because the Razorback is it's so broken. The Razorback is completely dominant right now. Tournament games are almost all Razorback mirrors. I can't believe they haven't changed the Razorback. That's crazy to me. This patch, I think, makes a lot of sense in the pre-Razorback world. Like, a lot of these changes, they make a lot of sense in the metagame if you look at the metagame before the Razorback came out. So this patch is just like a month late, would be my take on it. A month ago, this patch would have been fantastic. Now there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be addressed that just isn't being addressed, like Razorback and Tech Lab. Like, Mammoth is too good, Sandstorm's too good, Tech in general is coming out too quickly and is too dominant. And Razorback, man, Razorback is so insane. So, yeah, I think it's a good patch, but it's like, it's just a month late. And now that we're actually at the point we're at, we need a new patch, again, for the Razorback. And also, they just released the Shade, which is completely disgusting. The Shade is way overtuned. I think that needs an emergency nerf. And yeah, Razorback needs a change. So, my take on it basically is that the patch is pretty good. I think all of the changes are good except for the Liang change. Making Liang cost 40 is nuts. It's just that a lot of them aren't the right changes. Like, they're all good changes. They're just not necessarily the correct changes. They're not necessarily the right way to go about it. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you let me know what you guys think in the comments. And also, I'd like to just point out this Jade Catalyst missile change. I actually have a spreadsheet from Copycat detailing this exact change with numbers. So I'm pretty sure Copycat sent this into the devs and they took it on board, because I've literally, these numbers are in the spreadsheet he sent me. So good job, Copycat, getting that changed. Good job, man. All hail Copycat. Alright, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.